The first season of The Bear was released in June 2022. I had heard many great things, however I didn't hear anyone in the UK talking about the show that much, and I can honestly say that it might be one of my favourite shows I have ever experienced, and I genuinely really enjoyed it. The trailer, in my opinion, doesn't do it any justice, and if anything, I think it actually hinders any extra success the show could get on top of the already mass amounts of success it already has attained. I chose to give the show a go after watching Shogun and trying to focus far more on a slower lifestyle, and this show was quite great at doing exactly those things for me. So, let's talk about it. The first thing that definitely comes to mind when wanting to discuss this show is the mask that it presents itself whilst you are watching. This show, for anyone who doesn't know, is about a chef called Carmy and how he's taking over his brother's restaurant with the former staff and hiring a newcomer. He wants to turn it from a family-run restaurant on the corner to a powerhouse of fine dining, and the show explores this through Carmy. The show, on a face value analysis, is displaying what people's lives are really like who work in a kitchen, a tad dramatised. However, from the people that I know within my family and friends who work within kitchens, it is incredibly hard work, hard mentally, physically and emotionally. This show's mask is giving us a plot around opening and maintaining a high quality restaurant, but where this show truly shines is what is behind the mask, the true face of the show. Within The Bear, there is one big theme throughout each season. We see it develop from the main character to the side characters that we don't know much about at the beginning, to then fully understanding their motivations, life and desires. This theme is mental health, and the way it truly affects the everyday to day being of a person. The two most notable to discuss for me, in my opinion, is Carmy and Richie. Carmy throughout the show is dealing with what appears to be some form of PTSD from his experience working within other restaurants. At the beginning of the show, we see how these issues are cropping up and how he wants to make an outstanding restaurant but doesn't want to cause the same issues that he's had to the others who are working there. But in his quest for success, he is giving his staff the same issue as he was given to himself. We learn more about how he was having constant panic attacks and how he struggles deeply with his sleep due to those exact same issues. And the episode that best reflects the true lesson of how easy it is to destroy someone's mental health is in the final episode of season 3. He confronts the guy who gave him the majority of his problems. Instead of apologizing or having any sympathy for Carmy, he just looks at him like he's the crazy one, that he did nothing wrong and that if anything, actually is the reason for his success. To me, this perfectly encapsulates how something small and everyday to someone else can easily cause issues for others. Something like a small group of people who are doing stuff that's bordering on the edge and even teetering into bullying at school can create long-lasting effects on people's minds and how they view themselves as a person. They're simply having fun in their eyes, but in the person who's being teased or bullied, that's having detrimental effects. Richie, though, is the more interesting one to me. He reminds me on a smaller scale of Jaime Lannister in how that he was made into a really unlikable character, in my opinion, to one of the most likable across the entire show. Richie is dealing with 3 issues, but they are all rooted in one bigger issue. He, like Carmy, has lost his best friend, who was like a brother to him. During this time, his marriage was also crumbling, which meant that in a couple of years, he had gone from a relatively high moment in life of having a wife, a newborn on the way, and his best friend, to almost all of it being stripped away and becoming lonely. This is even something that gets brought up later by his daughter when she asks, very specifically, whether or not he is lonely. However, his coping strategy for both of these things is what brings you into the final issue of the 3, which is his over-the-top bravado that comes off as if he wants to make everything a joke or just fight, instead of having any of the negativity coming to the surface that he has to deal with head on. What we see with Richie is a guy who's dealing with his problems in a way that many of us know deeply, the one of loneliness, and how he's dealing with it in the same way that a lot of guys do. They get angry, they lash out, and instead of dealing with the problem they face through a healthy outlet, they put on a facade. All of this stems through this big issue that faces a lot of people today, which is a lack of direction, meaning, and purpose in life. Nothing shows this off better than the episode that was dedicated to his character's growth called Forks. In this episode, he goes from having the bravado of the confident loudmouth who finds cleaning forks beneath him. He believes that he was sent there as a punishment. Really though, he was actually learning valuable lessons, which is to take pride in your work, no matter the job you're doing. Which is why in the end, we end up seeing him later on go from being this confident loudmouth who's struggling all the time, but trying to act like it's water off a duck's back, to a different type of confidence. the one that comes from being proud in how he dresses, looks, feels, and performs. Because he was able to create purpose in his life, which was to be a great server to the people, it caused all of these other issues to start fading away. Maybe not entirely, but generally, he's making great progress as a character. With both of the characters, and even more that get time dedicated to them, we learn so much about many different mental health issues that people might be dealing with. The way that they might be trying to display themselves to the world, but fundamentally, what I love about the show is that it gives this message, which is to take pride in yourself and your work no matter the job. You're able to at least have that going for you. It'll probably help you in far more ways than it will actually negatively impact you. However, one way that it might not help you and can end up warping your mind in a way that is not beneficial for you in your own life and is displayed off perfectly with Carmy's relationship with Clair. When you work a lot and you have pride in what you're doing, distractions can end up feeling like weights dragging you down. This is shown off perfectly with this relationship. Carmy is dealing with his own issues, and he found someone who is able to help him with dealing with a lot of these issues, but he starts to connect the dots that never needed to be connected in the first place. Which is that his work has got worse because of Clair. Not because there isn't some legitimacy to this belief, as it's clear within season 2 that he struggles to not be all in on the restaurant or having a life outside of that. As shown in multiple episodes where he decides to go off and do things with Clair which interrupt with the plans with the restaurant. It all leads to the episode of him losing it as the day of opening the restaurant is stressing him out. Mix this with the fact that if the restaurant isn't a success, then it's going to be taken away from him. He ends up getting locked inside of the freezer that he was meant to deal with in a prior episode. What I love particularly about this episode is that it shows the viewer this great idea of learning the wrong lessons from events in your life. Instead of having the takeaway that the restaurant can actually be run without him, and his anger and lashing out whilst in the fridge doesn't help anyone, including himself. The first is proof that he can actually have a life outside of work, but he chooses not to realise this, as he's too focused on the freezer issue and the fact that it was his fault for the fact that he ended up going and seeing Clair instead of getting the door sorted, which then led to him being locked inside, and therefore him blaming Clair and the relationship as a distraction to his work, and therefore impacting him negatively. This lesson shows that it's hard to have a balance of work and life. What you might have to do in order to pursue perfection and success, but most importantly, what you might actually not need to give up in those pursuits. Instead, you might need distractions to become the best version of yourself, and in that way, you can achieve those things you truly desire. What did surprise me quite a lot was seeing how many people were complaining about season 3. I can definitely see why people might be making the complaints that because it's a season that doesn't have this massively drastic thing going on, that it's not as entertaining. It doesn't have an entire season dedicated to opening the restaurant. It also doesn't really have a big payoff. But what this season does do, and does really well, is a massive amount of character development and things to think on. The reason I believe that people didn't like this season in particular is because it could be misconstrued as a filler season. Similar to how season 4 of The Boys is being viewed as nothing more than a filler season leading up to the final season. So it means that they're setting up a load of different plot points that can be paid off in the next part, which means that this season just kind of feels a bit off. It doesn't feel as if anything's happening and it's not leading to anything. This is something that I do believe is a bad part about watching shows as they release instead of waiting for the entire thing to end, or at least the last season before it's going to be releasing, is that it kind of gives you this belief that every single new season that comes up needs to outdo the previous by miles, or that it has to end in this amazing crescendo. What really needs to happen is people need to stop thinking through the lens of action and outperforming another thing, and just think about the product in front of them, the message it's trying to tell, and the story it is conveying. I hope you enjoyed this little video just expressing some of my thoughts about this amazing show. I am thinking about rewatching it and probably will to do maybe a deep dive into it, so let me know if that is something that you would be interested with me doing. With that all being said though, if you did enjoy the video, please make sure to leave a like and do subscribe to the channel. If you want to support me directly, then go check out the Patreon, which will be down below. It gives you early access to videos like this, and also the main gaming channel if that is something that you're interested in as well. Now though, I hope that you enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a good one.